Thank you so much for that introduction, Renee. Thank you, everyone who is making this meeting possible. I am so grateful for each and every one of you listening and hosting and facilitating. Um, Also, so grateful to see so many friends, so many fellow travelers, familiar faces. I can't even begin to describe how grateful I feel. So I'm going to start with something that always brings me great joy at the beginning of gatherings, and that is to breathe in heart coherence breaths together. So if you're driving or walking or washing the dishes, you can still do this with us if it feels right. These aren't like holding your breaths, they're just normal breaths. And if you don't feel called to join us, that's okay too. You're still part of this space. When I first joined ACA, the first higher power I could connect to was the group that I was in. And that was the first experience of holding that I allowed myself to really receive consciously, which was in itself extremely healing. So as I'm introducing us into this moment, I'm connecting with the fact that if we were all in a room together, you would be able to look around and see 39 other people here in this space supporting each other and sharing what is a common experience. And the amazing thing is, we're not in the same room. We're actually all around the world and on all different continents. And when we breathe together, our hearts beat together. That's scientifically proven. So now we're 41 people who are in training our hearts collectively to the same vibration. And since this is a spiritual program based on action coming from love, I believe that we get to experience the expansion of love on this planet in this moment as we decide to join our hearts and breathe together. So if it feels right to you, we'll just exhale and I'll meet you at the bottom of your next exhalation and we'll just breathe in and out together 3 times. Okay. So breathing in and breathing out with a sound or a sigh if that feels right. Breathing in and letting it out. Yawns are a sign your nervous system is regulating. Breathing in the deepest breath you've taken all day. Oh. Thank you for indulging those moments. Hope you feel a little more connected. I do. The breath is the bridge between the body and the mind. And it's one of the most powerful tools I've ever known. Maybe the most powerful tool that has helped me to recover my sense of presence and peace and serenity. Mhm. I'm Veronica. I'm an adult child of an alcoholic and dysfunctional home. I am autistic, gifted. My body has complex PTSD. I'm intense, sensitive, and I'm okay. I've been in this program for over 2 years now, and it was my first experience with the 12 steps. Um, I got to this program because I was in a dysfunctional relationship that was triggering me because my partner wanted to drink alcohol. And that really bothered me because it reminded me of my dad being drunk. And he asked me, well, why can't you just be okay with me drinking? My friend's partner is an alcoholic and she's okay when we drink. And I thought, well, I'm not an alcoholic, but it really bothers me. And I have this huge problem with it. And that was when I realized that I had internalized my father's problem with alcohol and it had become my problem and I needed to do something about it. And so that's what brought me to the ACA rooms. And I was simultaneously exploring what is love addiction to understand what this tiger was that I had been keeping inside of a cage. Along the way, I realized that my actual addiction was self-hatred. I had been using perfectionism and workaholism and disordered eating and drugging and drinking and sex, all of that to abandon myself. And that was because I didn't believe that I was worthy of love. Because that's what I had been shown as a child. Um, my dad is a narcissist and an alcoholic. He and my mom did not raise me with any sense of self. I had a gigantic black hole inside of me that I couldn't even name until I came to this program and found identification with other adult children, other people that had been robbed of their sense of self at an early age. And that early loss of love created these frozen feelings inside of me that over the last 2 years have begun to melt. And as they did, I learned that I actually have the freedom to be who I am. And so that's why I love coming to speak and share my story, because it's a safe place to be fully and freely me. It's really healing to know that this space is here. And I think I ended my timer. Oops. Okay, it's okay. There's no time. Time's not real. Um, the experience of being held by people is something that I never knew. I grew up as an island unto myself. I didn't have parents who cared about me and my well-being. They trained me to serve their needs. Uh, I didn't have family members. My parents were totally cut off and isolated from their families, or did not have any family. Uh, I didn't have neighbors. I grew up in rural Connecticut where nobody talked to anyone else. I didn't have caring mentors or teachers that tried to reach out and guide me. Um, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was blessed with a very high level of intelligence and the ability to seem okay all the time. Uh, but the problem with being intelligent is that you're also extremely sensitive. And so you feel absolutely everything to the very deepest core of being possible. And it's such an overwhelming experience all the time. Um, so when I was born, I had in the first year of life, my mom's sister and both of my dad's parents passed away. Uh, and that was all of the support that would have been available to me. I was left with just one grandmother and two cousins who were just isolated from the family and much older than me. And so in the time when I should have been given the space to bond with my mother and feel like I belonged in the world, like I was celebrated and cherished and welcome, I was bathed in grief. Except my parents were emotionally immature, and so they didn't know how to grieve. And what they would have done, which I can only imagine, but also feel deeply inside of my body, is shut down and isolate. Uh, so ACA as a program for me is really just a big, long grief walk, learning how to grieve. And the 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 truth about grief is that we can't really do it alone. It's too overwhelming to do alone. This is what the Indigenous elders have taught us, that grief is an experience that must be held in community, in circle, because grief is the river of all souls. It's the deepest emotion that takes us out of this sense of continuity with material reality, with the world, and we just drop into this endless disconnection from what was. And we can't do that safely on our own. And so we need circles, and that is the healing power that I've experienced in ACA, is allowing myself to grieve, even when it doesn't make sense. Like, grief is not a mental, or even spiritual experience. It can be, everything is spiritual, but the spirit doesn't grieve because the spirit's infinite. There's no loss, it's all one. And the mind is the same. It just knows mental things, but the heart and the body, those grieve. I feel in my body the loss of love and safety and security. I feel in my heart the rupture with my higher power, with all of life and the whole universe. How could I have been abandoned instantly? Even before I was born, my mom was bathing me in her womb with fear and anxiety and shame. She didn't want to have kids. She had kids because she was afraid she would regret it if she didn't. And my dad was abusing her the whole time that she was pregnant. And when I was 3.5, my brother was born, and I instantly saw they were not going to be able to take care of him. And I remember being like 4 years old and telling them, like, he's not okay. Like, you need to, like, or like him or something, and then making fun of me for being aware of his needs. And that was a theme that went on for my whole life. My parents making fun of me for the way that I was. Um, I'm 34, and just this year I was diagnosed autistic. That means that my brain sees the world differently all the time. I think about things, I understand things differently. I come from a different set point. I need to move my body in different ways than is normal or typical. And my parents made fun of me for that all the time. My dad's favorite way to connect with me was belittling my intelligence. I grew up thinking that I was an idiot, that I was stupid, that I was dumb. And it wasn't until I found this group in ACA of gifted people last year that I actually discovered I'm not stupid. I'm not dumb. And that was such a revelation to me. So through ACA, I have really gained a sense of self for the first time in my life. I was robbed of that because my brother had no parents. I saw that no one was taking care of him. And so I became his parent when I was 4 years old. And my dad was a functional alcoholic. He would only drink at night at dinner. And so dinner time became like the biggest possible trigger for me, because I knew that was when he was going to switch personalities. He was going to become unpredictable and volatile. And my dad was the sensitive one. I should have been able to connect with him about being sensitive. My mom, it was just stone-faced, completely emotionless, except when she was triggered into anger, when she would violently attack me, mostly. Out of a sense of helplessness, not knowing how to deal with her emotions. And so that's where I learned emotional intoxication, was like, okay, so there's an emotion. We've got to either shut it down or project it onto someone. And if I'm hurting, I learned from her and my father, then I need to make other people hurt, because, somehow that's the solution. When I was 9 years old, my parents got divorced. And I remember being thrilled when my mom told me that was happening. I was so excited to see the war come to an end. Finally, my parents will stop trying to kill each other, and I won't have to be caught in the middle. Thank God. I was rudely disappointed because my father, although my mother was given full custody by the judge, my father convinced her that he should have 50% custody. he should have us half of the time. So, I mean, looking back on it now, it's obvious that he didn't want to pay alimony, and that's why. It had nothing to do with any altruistic desire to help us grow and learn. But the and that was the real first experience of abandonment that I had, with my mother leaving me with a narcissistic, psychopathic alcoholic half of the time. She got away. She got to leave when she divorced him, but I didn't. And it was much worse after the divorce because I was left alone with him. Not just alone, but with a child to defend, because my brother and I went back and forth between their houses Monday and Tuesday at dad's house, Wednesday and Thursday at mom's house, every other Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, alternating houses. So from the ages of 9 until 15, I never lived in one house for longer than 5 days, which is just, as an adult, the most effective thing I can imagine doing to a child. So I never had a sense of safety or security. And what happened in that void of protection, love, and care when I was left in the hands of my abusive father was unimaginable. He had already sexually abused me as an infant and committed incest. And he continued to sexually abuse me, but not overtly, because then he could have been targeted as a criminal. This was emotional incest. I never felt safe. I always felt like he was watching me, like he was looking at me, and he would tell me stories over and over again about how I was going to get pregnant because I was beautiful, and men would try to own me, and then I would ruin my life because I would just be a mom, a teenage mom. And that was the prophecy he spoke over my life to me every single night at bedtime when he would come drunk into the room. And I remember times when I had to push him away from his physical advances. And then when I was 11, my brother brought home the idea of doing a prank for April Fool's Day. And he was 8 years old, typical 8-year-old boy thing to do. And it turned out that that prank ended up with my father being arrested for trying to kill me. And I don't remember much about that night. I remember the flashing lights. I remember him being carried away in a police car. His sentence was 10 sessions of anger management and nothing else. Domestic violence today is when somebody's guilty of the specific kind of abuse that he enacted, is at least 25 sessions of anger management and no custody. But what happened was everything just went back to, I was 11 years old and I was still living with the parent who had tried to end my life. In jest, he was joking because he felt threatened by me, is what he told the police. An 11-year-old child. Mhm. That time in my life was that night. That was the night that the light went out for me. That was it. I lost all hope. And in that space of, he just tried to kill me. My mom knows full well, she's the one who called the police, even though she was living in another town. And she still sends me back to his house every week, again and again. She just keeps sending me back to him. I must not matter at all. My safety, joy, happiness, and well-being must be completely meaningless. And I must not be worthy of protection. Those are the only conclusions that an 11-year-old child, a 12-year-old child, a 13-year-old child can draw from this kind of experience. So that was the hell that I lived in, and I hated everyone and everything. And the only thing I could do was just be good at school. That was the only thing I could control. Was just let me just focus on school. I know the rules there. I can meet the rules. And that's where my workaholism developed really deep roots. Because I needed a sense of control. And I could get that by achieving. I couldn't overachieve because I was just trying to survive. So I never got the A plus. I only got the A or the A minus, which was a further blow to my sense of self and my self-esteem. Then when I was 15, my brother asked my dad after dinner one night, "What are we gonna do for Christmas?" There was an arrangement where Christmas Eve we would go to my mom's house and Christmas Day we would go to dad's house. My dad says something about how we never get to his house on time for Christmas. It's always, supposed to be Christmas morning, but blah, 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 blah. And my autistic brain, which has no filter, which sees things as they are, innocently says out loud, "Aren't you just supposed to be grateful that we're here at all?" I don't know. Isn't that how parents work? Aren't they supposed to be grateful for their kids? And that devolved into, obviously an argument, fight, rage, fit, from him and my stepmother attacking me for being the ungrateful one. They needed me to be the bad guy because they couldn't handle the fact that I was fucking right. And at the end of the night, I blacked out from rage because I always screamed back. My fight response is very strong. He said, "Pack your shit and get the fuck out." And that was the night that my dad abandoned me too. I had nowhere to go. My mom didn't even live in the same town. So I packed what I could and I walked across town to my friend's house. And in the morning, I called my stepmom and I said, "Hey, my backpack was too heavy to carry last night. Can you bring it to school for me?" And she goes, "Did you ask your father's permission if you could stay out on a school night?" They didn't remember kicking me out of the house. And that was it for me. I was done. I was done being the adult. I was done pretending like everything was okay. It was a sense of relief. Finally, they had abandoned me externally the way that they had abandoned me emotionally my entire life. So that year, I slept on friends' couches for the next month because my mom couldn't take me full time, and then she moved back to the town where my school was, and I lived with her. And the next year, I sprained my ankle, and the fibromyalgia that had been dormant in my body emerged, and I spent the next 15 years in chronic physical pain because all the emotions in my body were acting up. And nobody ever talked to me about trauma. I was 27 when I realized that I had complex PTSD, that the the experience that I had lived through wasn't normal, that my dad had sexually abused me, uh, that all of this was, it wasn't until years after I realized it was trauma that I learned about the concept of abandonment. It's incredible how strong the brain is when it comes to denial. It's profound. It amazes me the way that my brain protected itself from the truth of what happened. Because what happened was I grew up as a pillar unto myself. I had no one and nothing, and I just had to learn to get by on my own. I say I had no one and nothing, but through this whole story, there's a golden thread of grace that kept me alive. I should not be alive. It doesn't even make sense to me. I get chills, my hair stands up on end when I think about how is it that I am alive? It like it doesn't mean I should have been dead on a street corner from an overdose. I shouldn't have made it through all that to get two professional degrees, to build multiple businesses, to create a life in a totally different country. I moved to Costa Rica in 2017 after somebody was elected into office who was literally the spitting image of my father and all of his political views, and seeing my father as head of the free world was just, that's it, I'm done. And I blew everything up and I moved here. And that was when all the trauma started to come up because I finally had distance. I had separation. I had, for the first time in my life, I was safe. Nobody was going to show up at my door and torment me. And that was when I started to actually feel the terror. And that was when I went no contact with my father, none at all. And that was really hard because it meant I had to cut off my stepmom too, who, despite being an alcoholic herself, uh, did her best to love me and my brother. Too little, too late. So this golden thread of grace, I remember being 5 years old and telling my parents I wanted to be a nun. I was on fire with the Holy Spirit. And in classic cognitive dissonance form, they told me, you don't want that. While they forced me to go to church every single Sunday and spiritually abused me, you don't want that. But I did want to change the world. And when I was 17, seeing all the suffering around me, I went to the library, which was my safe place. And I took out a big old stack of books on spirituality and all the world religions. And there was Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, Rastafarianism, and Buddhism. I stopped at Buddhism because there they talked about suffering and the purpose of suffering being opening the heart to create more compassion, to create more space. And that made sense to me. Hold on. What? Yes, everything does happen for a reason. That's the only thing that's ever gotten me through, is believing that there's a purpose. And so that's why it's such a gift to me that you're here to let me share my story, because knowing that what I've been through can bring some kind of light to the world is just the only thing that keeps me going. The chronic pain that I suffered, the fibromyalgia, the constant fatigue brought me into yoga, where I learned to come home to my body, to unite my mind and my heart, to make peace with what I was feeling in the moment and move through it or sit with it or just be in it. That is something that has served me so well in my recovery as I learned to be my own loving parent. And I studied alchemy, the ability to surrender my will to divine will and transmute the shadows into light, which is exactly what recovery is for me. And I'm also going through a breakup right now. A year and a half ago, after only being in the program for 7 months, I started a relationship with a friend. And the whole time, it's just like, am I doing the right thing? Am I recovered enough to have a healthy relationship? Am I just enacting this self-sabotage through seeking external validation and love? I didn't know. I didn't know. I just had to keep following my heart. And now, a year and a half later, I'm at the place where I have to detach with love because he told me that he doesn't want to be in a relationship. And this is just another opportunity for me to get intimate with myself and my inner child, to prove that I can't control anyone around me, but I can control me. I can control that I'm not going to abandon myself. I'm not ever going to abandon myself. And that is emotional security like I've never known. I think most human beings are designed to experience a sense of holding and safety in their early lives so that they know what it is to surrender, to lean back, to rest and be at ease. And I didn't get that. I got fighting, and surviving. So being able to hold myself and being held by this program is healing for me. I've been working on this concept lately that healing and recovery are slightly different. Recovery is healing, but not all healing is recovery. Because when I need recovery, when I say that when I talk about recovery, what it means to me is that I don't know how to be held. If somebody comes to me with the medicine, I'm probably going to reject it. Because my body is like, no, 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 no. They're trying to control me. They're going to try and manipulate me. I don't deserve that. I'm going to all kinds of stories around how that thing that I actually need, I don't want. I'm not going to take it. But health and healing is like, okay, you're sick, normal. Everyone gets sick. Here's a medicine. Cool. Thank you very much. I'm going to take that. And now I'm back to homeostasis. What I recognize in adult children universally is this lack of experience being held, of receiving support. And the way that that just creates this complete rejection of all goodness, externally and internally. And so that is what ACA has gifted me. I have had sponsors. I have had small groups of people. I've had medium groups of people. I've had large groups of people. I've had nameless groups of people. I don't even know how many people are in this fellowship, but I feel held by it and cared for and supported and protected and encouraged and motivated. And my practice of recovery is just allowing that, because that's not easy for me. The people that were supposed to trust, that were supposed to care for me, were my greatest abusers. And they taught me how to abuse myself better than anything else. So this third step prayer, I'm going to read it. And if you want to pray it with me, you can connect to your higher power or whatever else right now. Great mystery, loving presence, God universe. I am willing to surrender my fears and to place my will and my life in your care today, one day at a time. Grant me the wisdom to know the difference between the things I can and cannot change. Help me to remember that I can ask for help. I am not alone. Amen. That last part, I am not alone, is the hardest one to remember for me. Last night, I came home from an event and just felt so alone and unheld and mired in this contrast. It had been a really positive. I was really filled with love and gratitude, and it was in that highest of highs that I got triggered remembering the lowest of lows. And so my beautifully perfect and fucked up brain went, oh yeah, here's a high. I know what's coming next. It's that low. And I just went straight there. And I woke up there this morning and I just felt alone and so unheld. And that's just because it's the memory. That's just what's familiar to me. It's not the truth. I know the truth. The truth is that I can trust life because that golden thread of grace has brought me all the way through all those 34 years of bullshit to this moment where I am held and supported by 49 gorgeous, beautiful souls who had no obligation to be listening to me. It's like no connection other than that you just want to be here. And that's something that I've been looking forward to for months. When I was contacted to speak at this meeting, it was months ago. In a totally different place. And knowing that this was coming, it helped me. Okay, there's a goal. There's something I'm moving towards. I'm held by this group, this experience. And that's the greatest gift I've ever known. Thank you so much. I always struggled with that existential loneliness. Uh, the doubt that I even exist is still very strong sometimes. Like I'm like, what's I know I actually exist. I had to work really hard before recovery in order to convince myself that I was real. Because there was no feedback. There was no like, hey, how are you? Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. Oh, it sounds like you're feeling this way. Oh, okay. Well, I can relate. This is none of that. That wasn't part of my life because I was so isolated by my pain, frozen and stuck, abandoning myself and my truth, denying my right to feel, to trust, and to talk, that I really was alone. But not anymore. Thanks to recovery, thanks to people like you, thanks to spaces like this. I think the last note I'd like to end on, and maybe this is inspiration for the shares, is self-amends. In step 8, we're asked to make amends to the people that we've harmed. And something that I notice about the yellow book is it skims over the self-forgiveness part, the self-amends. Yeah, it mentions that comes first, but it's such a monumental task for a person who has spent their entire life abandoning, abusing, and denying themselves. For me, that is going to be a lifelong journey, or I mean, at least 30, 40 years. Like, that's how long I spent hating myself. So like at step 7, we ask to be relieved of our shortcomings and survival traits. And there's this like accessing of humility, like I am a perfectionist. I've got that self-righteousness thing going, inflexibility, like, whoa, yeah, I got some stuff. And then it's all this surrounding truth, the approval seeking, and the addiction to excitement, and the fear of authority figures. Like, if those could just be integrated, that would be wonderful. And that leads to self-forgiveness. Like, oh, okay, yeah, like something can help me, and I don't have to be that way. And then it's time, in the words of Tony A, to open myself to the unconditional love of my higher power. And when I say higher power, you can think about it as like a secular, like the group, uh, or the inner loving parent. And that is such work. I mean, to open oneself to unconditional love after a lifetime of abuse and abandonment, of betrayal, of broken trust, of harm, it is such work. And so I really invite this to be a safe space to share about what that's been like for you, and without judgment. to just be present and accepting of, yeah, it's hard. And like even literature can do a better job acknowledging how hard it is to forgive ourselves, to love ourselves, to acknowledge that I love me, I love you, I'm not leaving, I got you. It's hard, and I get to practice what that might feel like by feeling you offering me that as I share. So, as you get the chance to share here in a minute, like I just invite you to all of us to enact that giving is receiving. That like as I give space, I'm also receiving it. And even if no one's speaking, we're giving each other that space and letting that be that spiritual experience of love. So uh I hope that I've shared strength, hope, and experience in a way that is restorative and regenerative. And I really appreciate your kind attention, your smiles, and your faces. Even if it's just your name on the screen, your presence is felt and appreciated. And I would like to continue sharing my story. So if you know a meeting that has a need for a speaker, reach out to me. And if you yourself would like to be heard and reach out, please don't hesitate. I'll put my number in the chat. I do outreach on WhatsApp, and I'm really grateful for my recovery. Thanks. I pass.